Hello, lovelies, and welcome to Rwanda Now and Then. This is a series that I'm doing where I go back through an old diary that I kept between 2007 to 2009 when I very first arrived in Rwanda. It's kind of an interesting little look back through history because I still live here today and so much has changed, and it's just really interesting to go back and look at little me little me and the whole experience of meeting Rwanda for the first time, albeit many years ago. So cheers, crack open a mutzig, let's dive into it. Okay, so in this episode we're going to wrap up the second half of September. And this is September 2007, so it's about a month before I fly out to Rwanda. And in the last episode, I went out for a leaving do with my friends and I was starting to pack up my home. It was all starting to feel a little bit real. So if you want to catch up with the series, I'll leave the full playlist below, or there's probably a tab somewhere, probably over my face right now. And you can go and catch up with that if you want to. You don't have to. You can dive right in with us now. What I'm doing in this episode, we're kicking off with Harborne Hall Part 2. So, Harborne Hall was this really old sort of building, this old hall in Birmingham, the outskirts of Birmingham. And this is where VSO used to send all of their volunteers that were going out all over the world. We first had to go and do pre-departure training at Harborne Hall. It was a little bit like Hogwarts. If you want to get a flavour, I can suggest that you pop back 2 videos to my first training at Harborne Hall. I was doing things a little bit out of sync because I was finishing up my MA, and because of that I wasn't going out with everybody else who was coming out to Rwanda, so I was a little bit delayed whilst I finished up my my master's degree. And so this second training that I went on, it was called P2V, Preparing to Volunteer, and that should have been the first one that I ever went on, but because I was out of sync, it was the second one that I went on. 24th of September 2007, I think this was the day after I got back, and I'm writing up my experience. Just got back from round 2, P2V, Preparing to Volunteer. Again, full on, but this time, instead of being the only one in the group to be there for the first time, I was the only one who'd been there before. So yes, the first time I turned up, I'd never been to Harborne Hall, but because I was joining later courses, everybody else had been there before, which was kind of nice because everybody could tell me what to do and where to go and what to expect. But this time around, I was the only one who'd already been to Harborne Hall, so I was the grown-up. Didn't last long. This is the course most people do first, whether they've got their placement or not. There were quite a few people who had applied and were waiting to be offered a placement. So yeah, they'd often accept people based on their skills and their CV and their experience, and then when a suitable placement came up, they'd offer it. I had already been offered my placement. I already knew that I was coming to Rwanda by this point to work with the Rwanda National Union of the Deaf. Earlier on in the series, I talked about being offered 2 placements, one in Kenya, one in Rwanda, and I chose Rwanda. So I knew that I was coming to Rwanda, but I didn't know when. I hadn't got my departure date yet. Very different to the training skills course, which was the first one I did. Felt slightly slower and more methodical, plus a much larger group. There were about 17 of us and no small group work split like last time. It was presented in nice bite-sized chunks rather than all one subject. It didn't get as hyper and comical as last time, partly because of the content of the course and partly due to the personalities of the participants and trainers, I guess. And also, looking back at it, I guess because the first course that I did was with people who were just about to go out to their placements. So of course they were hyper. They were kind of like, woof! They were as I was about to get, and so I kind of got carried away in their energy, whereas this one was a lot of people arriving for their first ever training, first ever time at Harborne Hall, not sure what to expect, a little bit more reserved, but yeah, we loosened up. I feel well and truly institutionalized now though. All I ever seem to do there is eat. 3 square meals a day, including pudding. Heavy food and early dinner around 6 p.m, whereas I'm used to eating around 8 or 9 p.m. But it's free. What can you do? I actually do remember the food at Harborne being pretty good. Yeah, but it was very much, I talked about this before, it's very much like a sort of a boarding school regime, like breakfast, lunch, dinner, same time, same time, same time. And after a couple of days of that, you kind of start to feel a bit institutionalised. I arrived a little disorganised as I thought it was the other course, the long 5-day one, but it wasn't. Took the laptop for entertainment, which I didn't really need. However, I did get my own room this time and the most luxurious showers in comparison to last time. I was in the retreat, part of the extension, on the top floor, room 29. Gorgeous showers. Hope I get it again for the next round. Did make a difference having my own room. Didn't feel so bad staying at the bar or pottering around in the morning. So, Friday night began with a brief introduction to the course and the facilities, then adjourning to the bar. Again, some lovely people there, especially Michaela, an Italian volunteer with the most gorgeous dreadlocks I have seen in my life. If you've been following this series, you'll know that I used to make money dreadlocking hair. So that sounds like a bit of a random thing to say, but professional curiosity, when I see a really nice set of dreadlocks walk past, I noticed that. She'd already worked in Kenya and said that the dreadlocks helped her to fit in really well there and brought the prices down to the local rate. But she does have quite dark features anyway, so I don't think it'd have the same effect for a white Brit. Yeah, there was already a sense that, if you glow in the dark like I do, prices might be a bit higher. So yeah, I don't think that dreadlocking my hair would have got me the discount that she got in Kenya. And also much later on, when I got here, I came to realise that dreadlocks actually were quite frowned upon. You very rarely see them around here. I'll probably get onto that a bit later on, but Rwanda has quite high standards of dress and appearance and judges quite harshly on those. And dreadlocks are, they're not really as welcome here as I guess in a lot of other countries. I also made friends with Maria, a businesswoman from London, and we ended up playing Chisanga and Paul, 2 of the trainers, at pool. We beat them at doubles, which was a serious mistake because Chisanga spent the next day enacting revenge upon us, choosing us for extra reading and volunteering tasks. Pants. I remember Chisanga quite clearly, but I don't... Oh no, I do remember Paul. I remember both of the trainers. I'm struggling to place Maria face. It was a very long time ago. In fact, I don't even remember playing pool. So, but we won, yay! But we got more work. Boo! It was a lot of fun. Harborne Hall. It's hard to describe. Like I say, it was highly institutionalised, but at the same point, it was. My goodness, you bonded with people instantly there because it was just an entire house full of people who were about to be flung into the far reaches of the unknown, places they'd never been before, to do things they might never have done before, or at least certainly not in those circumstances. Yeah, and there was like an instant sort of bond of friendship. And also, I've talked about my VSO interview before, and the psych evaluation was intense. So you were kind of surrounded by people who were all a bit like you. What they were looking for during your assessment and selection was quite specific. And it was a lot to do with sort of an openness of personality, kind of a willingness to admit when you're wrong, a kind of a curiosity and an ability to engage with other people. So, you were surrounded by everybody else who had also passed that psych evaluation and that kind of selection process. So it shouldn't have been that surprising really that we all kind of got on because we all sort of had similar personalities, not the same, but there was something about everybody in that place that was up for an adventure, Yeah, I have such a lot of fondness for VSO. I really do. In later life, I knew of some people who didn't have great experiences and didn't enjoy it so much. But I really did. I really did. It came along at exactly the right point in my life and gave me a challenge that I needed. I think I felt like I was stagnating a little bit. So anyway, back to the diary. So yeah, I'm just talking a bit about the people I went drinking with. There was a bar at Harborne Hall, and there was also a pub in the village. So yeah, it was dangerous times, but good times. The first night was a late one, and much pool was played and beer consumed. Amazingly, I felt quite chirpy the next morning after a shower and breakfast. Just as well with 12 hours of training ahead. Yeah, they worked you. They worked you. The first half of the day was spent exploring issues such as defining development and disadvantage, power and development, and aid, trade and debt, all about how world banking works, how disadvantage becomes a cycle that's hard to break, and how power and corruption come into it. Right. This is a really interesting bit here. So after lunch, we played the game. So there's a game called the trade game. I'll link to it below. It was invented by the World Council of Churches, but it is a fantastic game. That's all I can say. It is absolutely brilliant. So the World Trade Game was initially developed in the 1990s by ActionAid. There we go. So it's only been preserved online by the World Council of Churches. Its strength is its simplicity. 6 groups of players represent 2 rich, 2 middle income and 2 poor countries, and each group has different resources and technological potential. So basically, you do need quite a few people to play it. I'd say you need 12 people at least to play it, so 2 in each group. But if you're interested in international development and how trade and economics impact countries and create disadvantage, this is a hell of a resource. It's brilliant. It's absolutely brilliant. Quite easy to play. You don't need much. Scissors, rulers, paper, and off you go. So I highly recommend this game. It was a real eye-opener because you know in your head that economics and capitalism creates inequality, but this game just drove it home in the most tangible way. You could see it happening in front of you. Really great game. Yeah. So I said it was fantastic, really drove home a point. I was part of a 2-person Thailand. It was frustrating as hell. The bank kept closing just as we got there. Our products were substandard, but if we got the UK to bank them for us, they were perfectly acceptable. We never had enough to purchase the basic production equipment we needed, so ended up selling off all of our resources for whatever we could get. We were slipping further and further into debt, yet we were still better off in the end than Tanzania. It was a hell of a game. That's all I can say. Get 12 people together, play the game. It makes a point. We then went on to explore the effects of globalisation on developing countries, how development affects the environment differently in the North and South. We also had a 2-hour session on HIV and AIDS, which was really sobering. One of the things that was most concerning was that some communities are resistant to the use of condoms because they are suspicious that it's part of a white tactic to reduce the population. In colonial times, Africans were discouraged from having large families because the colonists wanted less black people around. It was not all doom and gloom though, as some countries like Uganda, which borders Rwanda, have managed to turn the rate of infection around and are starting to win the battle through education programmes. We were also taught that it is the role of all VSO volunteers, whatever their job description, to play an active part in HIV/AIDS education whilst on placement, either through talking to people we meet or joining local community projects. It's interesting. Today HIV and AIDS is so manageable. There's a prophylaxis which can help to prevent you from getting it. I've forgotten what it's called. Oh, it's called PrEP, PrEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis, which can help you to prevent getting HIV. And, also the drugs that are available now to manage it and live a long and healthy life are, they exist. Whereas even 20 years ago, it wasn't so much like that. I mean, I grew up in the 80s, the 90s. There were a lot of really harsh storylines on TV. I remember the EastEnders storyline. Was it Martin? There was a character called Martin, and he got HIV/AIDS. He got full-blown AIDS, and it was a really tough storyline because he's a very loved character, and it was a really harsh story to watch. So you grew up in fear of it, strongly in fear of it, and even at this time, yeah, I mean, it's come so far now. But as well, it's difficult because, I mean, we're now in an era where international aid programs are just being shut left, right and centre. USAID, DFID, CEDA, they've all gone. And, access to these drugs, is beyond the reach of many people. There's a clinic that I know of here. I used to work with a survivors organisation, and they have a clinic where they hand out free medication and drugs to HIV/AIDS patients, and I don't actually know their status now as to whether they can still continue to do that, which, I mean, that's ugly. I mean, that just really hits you, when you had something that kept you healthy and kept you well, and then you have it taken away, by billionaires, by countries run by billionaires. I'm not going to go on a rant about it, but you know what I mean? It's... Our priorities as a species are entirely in the wrong place. Right. I decided to look after myself that night and went to bed early. There was another course on and the bar was packed, but I was also utterly shattered by that point. I hit the hay by 10:30. I also figured out that if I had a shower before bed, I could have a slightly longer lie-in the next morning. Yeah, I'm not an evening showerer. I like to have a shower first thing in the morning. I think it's because, I don't know, I've got quite thin hair, like not very thick hair. And so, when I sleep and I roll around, it gets a bit sweaty. It looks a bit yucky in the morning. So I've always, my whole life, I like to have a shower in the morning. I never feel entirely clean if I get up and do things and I've only had a wash. But different people, different preferences. We started by exploring cultural issues, power and empowerment, our role as volunteers, VSO's expectations of us, and what VSO's goals for development are. So yeah, it was sort of a group chat. Yeah, it's important to know, what the overall goals of VSO are so that you can figure out how you fit into that. That we're all working in a similar direction. The after dinner session was particularly useful. It covered relationships whilst on placement and raised some seriously interesting questions which we explored with drama techniques. VSO are really open about this subject and promote healthcare. Obviously, HIV and AIDS epidemic is a major concern, and emotional and cultural good practice. There were some case studies from previous volunteers and a video, which was all very interesting stuff. The racial aspect is very interesting, as white people, men and women, do tend to receive a lot of attention because they are seen as wealthy and liberal. This made it very hard for a number of volunteers who did like someone because they were constantly suspicious, unsure whether the person they liked really did like them back, or was just attracted by the prospect of material goods or a visa to the UK, which apparently is not uncommon. So it was good to have a think and discuss these issues. Wow, that's a lot. I remember that session very, very clearly. It was like, sex education in school, but plus. There was a lot of ground covered. So in the last episode, I did mention that I got a pre-departure pack for Rwanda, which specifically covered intimate relationships in Rwanda. You can go to the last video. Actually, I'll leave it below this one as well. And just to reiterate, this was written almost 20 years ago. In fact, it was 20 years ago. It was 2004, this document. So some things have changed since then. A lot has stayed the same. But I was saying one thing I loved about VSO is the fact that they did cover this stuff. You know, they weren't naive. They weren't painting a glossy picture. They had many, many decades of experience of, you know, volunteers going abroad, having relationships. And they had a lot of feedback to prepare us for when we went out, which I think is really important. You know, I didn't write about it here, but I do remember when we were talking about HIV and AIDS and about the relationship situation, there was one quite heavy-hitting video that we were shown. And it was a lady who'd gone out on placement, and she, you know, one mistake, and she contracted HIV and came back from her placement HIV positive. And again, like I say, back then, it wasn't quite as manageable as it is today. And I remember that being sort of, when I say it was sex education plus, it was like, yes, you know, and this is what can happen, and this is a first-hand account of what can happen. So, you know, rubber up. There was no mincing of words. There was no fairy flossing around it. It was quite direct information. And it was information that we all needed. You know, I mean, like I said before, you can't move somewhere for 2 years of your life and not have a relationship with anybody. It's very rare. I mean, it does happen. It's very rare. Unless you're going on placement with your partner, maybe. But that last bit as well was very important. You know, because we were all going to countries that had a vast financial disparity compared to our own, because that's what VSO does. It goes to places where perhaps the education system and the resources and the skills are, you know, less available, and provides those skills and, you know, that kind of mentoring. Any relationship with a large wealth disparity, be that in the UK or be that anywhere else, is going to cause certain frictions and is going to play on your mind and is going to cause doubt. It was extremely pronounced in many countries that people went to, and it has been extremely pronounced in Rwanda. I will not mince my words over that. And, you know, I've seen many interesting situations arise, of which I will probably talk a bit about as we get further into the diary and I actually end up in Rwanda. You know, there are expectations that volunteers might have, and also a lot of people leaving their home countries looking for an adventure and, you know, hoping possibly for romance and something interesting to happen. And on the opposite side, there are huge assumptions and expectations from the people that you're going to meet about what a Western country looks like. Actually, one second. Get this book. This book was written by my friend Henry Nyakarundi, and he grew up as a Rwandan refugee in Burundi, and he ended up studying at university in America and spent about 17 or 18 years there before moving back to Africa. Get this book. Okay, it's called My African Dream. I'll leave the link below. Get this book. If you want to know from the opposite side what people were thinking about the West from Africa, this is the book to read, because he tells you all about his expectations of moving to America and what America would be like, and, you know, how much opportunity and wealth and possibility there was there. And I love that book because, you know, you often hear from Westerners about their expectations about moving to Africa, but you don't always hear about Africans' expectations of moving to the West. And that is a bloody brilliant book for that. Anyway, yes, but moving on. So you've got these massive differences in financial haves and have-nots combined with these, built up fantastical images of places and people that, don't really meet the reality. I know I'm babbling here. We're going to go into this in a lot more throughout the diary. By the end of this series, you're going to go, oh yeah, no, I get what you mean, if you don't already. But it's quite funny because they told us in that second session, or that first session for a lot of people, that there would be that suspicion around wealth disparity and whether or not somebody genuinely likes you and wants to be your friend, or whether they just want, to get in for some money and some, opportunities. And we were told that from day one. And yet I will say, I think a lot of us had forgotten it by the time we arrived. We'd forgotten that and then went through steep learning curves all over again. But it just makes me laugh. It does, because, like I said before, I was a baby. I was 26 years old. And I was learning all of this, and not that I'm an elderly woman yet, but, I've seen a few things and it's funny to look back on. Anyway, so today we rounded off by exploring the things that make us tick, the things we think we'll have trouble managing without, the things that are important to us, and how we will deal with our own expectations if they are not met. We also had a talk from the funding team about ways to help raise money and awareness, which was slightly too much for some of us to get our heads around by that point. Yeah, I think we've been doing training like all day by that point, and then somebody, like a pop-up on or like an ad break in YouTube, somebody just popped up and said, hey, you can help us to raise money, and we're all just like, okay. It was possibly bad timing, but it was interesting. So yes, another session down and a glossy 415-page good health guide to take away with me. What, does this still exist? It does still exist. Look at that. The Traveller's Good Health Guide. Yes, they gave us a fat wad, a travel guidebook to health abroad. I don't know where that is. I don't know if I still have that. I feel like I don't. I haven't seen it in years. But I wouldn't get this one because it was published in 2004, I think. Was it? Oh no, 2006. Yeah, that was a little bit out of date. I don't know if they've published another one that's a bit more recent. But most of this information you can probably just find online nowadays. It was all starting to feel a bit real anyway, but I got home to find my departure date had arrived. I had a sixth sense it was about to. I even checked my email at Harborne Hall in case. An hour before I got home, Heather, my pre-departure coordinator, had emailed it. Heather, I'm not sure where you are in the world or what you're doing now, but know that your time at VSO was deeply appreciated. Heather was brilliant. She was a contact at VSO headquarters who just talked you through everything very calmly, and allayed any doubts or crises you might be having, and repeatedly re-emailed you a lot of paperwork as you lost it along the way. So wherever you are, Heather, I hope that your life has been lovely, and I hope it continues to be. They want me in Rwanda for the 4th of November to join the second half of in-country training. So I should fly on the 3rd. So the 3rd of November, 2007. Bit sooner than I was expecting. Thought maybe mid-November, but that's cool. I'm leaving a bit later than most of the Rwandan volunteers because of my MA, hence I'll miss the first half of the training, but I'm sure I'll catch up to speed. So yeah, these sessions at Harborne Hall were my pre-departure training, and when I arrived in the country I would get in-country training and orientation. And there were 2 sessions, and like I say, because I was completing my masters, I would miss the first part of that, but I would join the second part. So, eep! What the hell am I doing? Blah, wee pop. Yeah, I think I was having a bit of an excitement meltdown there. Yeah, it was very, very real. And, it's one thing to imagine a new life abroad and going away and signing up for 2 years in Central Africa. And then it was sort of another thing to come face to face with the reality of a leaving date, a concrete leaving date. But as I say, and breathe. And I did. And what's the next post? G1G1, pretty good, eh? What? The first countries to receive the donated laptop. Wait. What's this article? Now, this is interesting. So this article was on the BBC, 24th of September 2007, and it's talking about the One Child, One Laptop scheme. It was really big news in development at the time that every child in, I think it was secondary education, was going to get a laptop. Yeah, so it was kind of dreamt up in 2005 by a guy called Nicholas Negroponte, co-founder of the MIT Media Lab. And the idea was to create these quite basic laptops that children could use in schools, and I think they operated, you could wind them up to charge the battery, and yeah, they were supposed to be usable in rural areas and to help kids in developing countries to kind of catch up technologically. But yeah, there were actually a few problems with it. I think from what I remember reading, I'll find the article and I'll leave it below, but it folded. It kind of folded about 5 years later. So by 2010, I think it wasn't still working so well, because I think the mechanisms on the laptops were breaking. They were supposed to be able to produce a laptop for $100, but I think it cost about double that, so it was actually more expensive than they were expecting. But even so, the technology, it wasn't really up to scratch, and I think the laptops broke. I read an article about it. I'll find that article, I'll leave it below. But the really interesting thing about this is that Rwanda was one of the countries involved, and it was brilliant. It was a huge, big hype at the time, and the scheme is still featured on the back of our 500 franc notes. So if you turn over the green 500 franc note, you'll see children sitting at a table with laptops, and I'm fairly certain that image on the note came in as a result of the One Child, One Laptop scheme all those years ago. 26th of September 2007, flights and neckache. Okay. Arg, what a state. Had a really chilled out day yesterday, doing absolutely nothing but recovering from Harborne Hall. In the evening, Pete, Gedge and Phil decided to go out into town for a few quiet drinks, and I joined them. Oh gosh, from what I remember of my friends back then, it was never a quiet drink. Here we go. A few quiet drinks resulted in Pete, Gedge and I headbanging the night away at rock night at the Welsh club, Club Iverbach. This was not a strategic move. I wonder if that still exists, Club Iverbach. So there's an old article here about it, but it's from 2004. So I don't know if the Welsh club in Cardiff still exists. Let me know below. This was not a strategic move. I didn't get home until 2 a.m. The final song we danced to was Rage, Killing in the Name of. It was a very weird night. The DJs completely misjudged the mood of the crowd, leaving the dance floor empty for a significant time by manically alternating between cheesy disco student music and death metal. Slightly confusing, but we eventually got them to play Rage Against the Machine, and now I can't lean my head forward because it's in danger of falling off. It's been a long time, ho-hum. Used to go to rock night every Monday at the Fez Club in Reading after the pagan moot I ran with my best mate Cassie. That's where my partner and I got together, and Cass and her now husband Sean. So there was a huge nostalgia involved in setting foot in a rock club again. Yeah, I mean, rock clubs were a huge part of my student days. I used to go down there with my partner, and his best mate and my best mate got together, and they are still happily married to this day, which is kind of cute. Very, very lovely. I recently gave all my big baggy jeans to Jumble. Jumble is a very British word. So when I was a kid, you used to have jumble sales. So at your local village hall, they'd put out tables and you'd sell unwanted household goods and old clothes. And jumble is just short for jumble, anything that you're just going to throw out or take down the charity shop, basically, or the thrift store. Is your jumble. Felt conspicuously badly dressed for the occasion. It was a total last pint pub's closing decision to go, but it was fun. And there was a couple of very old classics that I remember from back when I was at uni. They included Limp Bizkit's My Generation and Jimmy Eat World's Bleed America. Oh, I love Jimmy Eat World. Oh my goodness. Wow. Yeah. Salt Sweat. Sugar on the Asphalt. Another classic. Otherwise, a depressingly pants selection of music. We had to ask for Rage Against the Machine twice, and they looked at us as though it was a strange request. Also asked for Drowning Pool's Let the Bodies Hit the Floor, as I love that song, but no joy. Funny to think those have endured for 6 or 7 years now. Man, they've endured for almost 20 years now. But that's bizarre. I mean, if you're going to have a rock night, then, you know, Rage and Drowning Pool, I think actually by law, you have to play those. I think it's, you know, you have to. Oh my goodness. And then there's a little paragraph here. So, my partner back then and I used to live in Reading, and we shared a house. Well, he shared a house and I kind of moved in with a lovely bloke called Sonny. And he used to be part of a rock band, heavy metal band called Stale Fish One. So they had an album called Smashed Bottles and Broken Fences, which is still available on CD, I think, from Amazon. Oh my goodness me. We used to go to their gigs. Wow. Okay. So, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say it's been a very, very, very long time. I'm not convinced they've sold a CD or that particular CD for quite a while. So if anybody wants to surprise them, it's about £5. Go and buy their CD because that would probably shock the hell out of them. I don't know. Yeah, go and buy Smashed Bottles and Broken Fences by Stalefish One. I'll leave the link below. He's since moved to rugby with some members of Stalefish One to reform another band, Whisper in the Riot. One to keep an eye on. Whisper in the Riot, that's a great name for a band. Love it. Yeah, so actually he moved to very close to where I grew up. I very almost went to study drama in rugby. I went to the open day and I got offered a place, but then the Brit School came calling and I was like, bye, see ya. I feel awful about it because they were so lovely to me when I went to view the place, but London called. London calling. Right, promotion over. The reason Rock Night was not strategically a good idea was because I had a dental checkup today for VSO. Wasn't until 12:20, but when your neck doesn't work, it's not fun. So yeah, I turned up with a raging hangover and, you know, I've been headbanging all night. I was walking in like this, you know, I needed a neck brace and I had to sit there whilst he got out the drill and started to mess about in my mouth. I was not enjoying that. Even though I know that the drill, like the descaler, isn't going to hurt me, the minute it touches my gum, I just can't deal with it. Yeah, so then I had to go and photocopy my passport and send it to VSO. And I received my flight details through. I'm going via Nairobi on Kenya Airways. Details as follows. So this was the flight I was booked on. 3rd of November, Kenya Airways, departing Heathrow, Terminal 4, which is a terminal that I have become very familiar with over the years. Terminal 4 is still the one that you go from today. I was leaving at 7 p.m. UK time, and I'd have a couple of hours layover in Kenya before hopping over to Rwanda, arriving in Kigali at 5 minutes past 10 on the 4th of November 2007. So it was very, very real at this point. Sorry, feeling a little flutter there for baby me. I was happy though. I was really excited. So the next day, 27th of September, sunset on Cardiff. This is a picture from my window. Well, 'tis my last night in Cardiff tonight. I sit in an empty, boxed up attic, eating chocolate fingers, Bombay mix, and sipping on a can of cider. Tomorrow, I pack my car and head for Gloucester. That's where my dad lives. I first came here in 2004 when my partner and I finished travelling around Australia. I bumped into an old acquaintance from uni who helped me to find a job with the British Deaf Association, where I met Suki. Suki was like my best mate through my time in Cardiff. Much happened here in Cardiff. My partner and I had some good times despite ending our relationship. But he's happy and settled now. And we've had many great times with our wonderful friends Gedge, Mark, Pete, Suki, Lucy, Marie, Gareth and John, to name the usual suspects. Going to miss you guys big time. Goodbye, farewell to a wonderful city. It's been a pleasure living and drinking here, even if I wasn't exactly smitten the first time I ever set eyes on you. That's true. I moved to Cardiff because my partner got a job there. So we travelled around Australia, and when we got back, he got offered a very nice job in Cardiff, and we had no money. So we thought we'd go. But I remember he took me there to see the town for the first time, to see what I thought of it. And I have to admit, I was not immediately sold. I mean, we just had this incredible experience travelling around Australia, the most amazing things like looking at the stars in the outback, paddling in the Indian Ocean. It was incredible. And all I remember about the first time that I set eyes on Cardiff was I came out of the train station and it was just concrete. It was not a good looking place at that point. I don't know if it's changed or it looks the same, but all I remember is like some kind of stone sculpture, very sort of industrial looking. It just looked like concrete, and I remember just looking around going, oh, I really wasn't sold on it. But he had a job, we needed the money, so we thought we'd stay and we'd give it a go. You have been good to me, and so much has happened here, not least my master's degree. I feel the time has rightly come to a close, but I shall not forget you ever. And I haven't, I'm still talking about it. Here we are, 20 years later. You were home for a while and will always be familiar. Here's to the Buffalo Bar, Poets Corner, Toucan Club, Rummer, yay the Rummer, Exit, Club X, Bar Icon, Chip Alley, and last, but definitely never least, Imochindi. Ta-da. My goodness. Oh, I was very happy there. A beautiful sunset. I mean, my goodness, what a way to go out, eh? What a sunset to go out on. Okay, I'm not going to leave it on a sad note. I'm not. We've got one final post to close out September. Malvern Flower Show. So I drove over to my dad's, and the day after I left, so yesterday I packed up the last of my belongings and headed to Dad's, arriving at exactly the same time he was bringing his car back from the garage, so I followed him into our street. Today we went to Birmingham to pick up Auntie Jean from the station. She's come down from Carlisle for our impending holiday to Mallorca. We detoured via Malvern on the way back to check out their flower show. It was looking a bit gloomy on the way there, but thankfully lightened up by the time we arrived. It was a spectacular show with plenty of bonsai, flycatchers, cacti, veg, colour and statuesque presents. It's a bit literary for a blog, isn't it? Statuesque presents. Oh wow, beautiful pictures though. Was a lovely day, but it's early to bed for us as we have to leave at 5 a.m. tomorrow to get the plane. My gosh, wow, I forgot all about this. I just got my flight dates to go to Rwanda and I completely forgot I was going on a family holiday with my dad, Marilyn and Auntie Jean to Mallorca. I totally forgot about that. So I guess like the next episode is probably going to be about Mallorca. How strange, but uplifting, because it completely took my mind off the fact that I just left my home and all my friends behind. So not a bad post to close out the month. So yes, guys, I hope you're enjoying this series. Let me know below and just... yeah, I mean, from here on in, except for Mallorca, we're going to start to be talking quite a lot more about Rwanda, I think, because this is about a month before I flew here for the first ever time. So, catch you in the next one.